it's an incredible brand, and it's a place that has transformed lives. Even, for Myra and myself, we reflect back at our time in school, and you have that connection to your campus and your school, and it's that time period of your life where things you're learning, your voice as a young adult, and that lifelong learning mindset is something that you get to be hands-on and learn how to think through things, how to write, as you mentioned. And I think that's my biggest takeaway from my time in college is it taught me how to problem solve, how to work as a team, how to do all these different things that regardless of what industry you end up in, it provides a foundation for you. I'm not doing anything I have a degree in these days. But there's skills I learned from that time there that absolutely I use every single day.
I would agree. There is no way I would be where I am. And again, not in the educational path. My career path took a different turn, but it was very interesting. When I was at university, it was writing across the curriculum. And so in every class, like, we were learning how to write, how to think differently. And, there wasn't AI. There was not Google. Like, we were reading and thinking and interpreting. And I am very fortunate because I would think of everything I learned. Writing across the curriculum has served me so well because every job description says, are you a good communicator? And I can easily say yes, because that was 4 years of every class at some point was you have to tell a story. You have to write about this.
Absolutely.
So true. So true. I appreciate, I think, that perspective from both of you very, very much. It's critical.
Absolutely. So you get your career started at the University of Chicago, find your path, go through 30 plus years of doing what you're doing. But on the heels of that, you also are a public speaker. Mm-hmm. You've been a public keynote speaker hundreds of times, a keynote speaker 20 times, but spoken
20,
publicly
30, somewhere
around there. Most recently, a TED-style speaker for using AI for surgically precise networking at the Legal Sales and Services Organization. That is a tongue twister. Talk a little bit about that experience. What was that like?
Sure. I started doing a lot of public speaking early on because I was managing people early on in my career. And what a good public speaker should ideally be doing is educating and entertaining. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's the essence of TED, technology, entertainment, and education. So for me, I love teaching people. I love teaching people something that I'm passionate about. And I was an early tech adopter in every space, every situation. And this opportunity most recently to speak to an external group, I speak frequently for the firm and I educate our folks on an ongoing basis about marketing-related topics and business development-related topics. But I wrote a LinkedIn post about a situation I had with a client, a legal client. This is before I went back in-house. And they said that they were going to an event and they wanted to understand what a person did because they wanted to understand at the event how their services were applicable. And I said, you're thinking about it in a very myopic way.
Yeah.
I said, how often do you use any sort of AI? And chat was obviously a little bit newer last year. But what I realized is she hadn't been using it at all. This was a junior lawyer.
Okay.
And I said, let me show you how we can use chat to actually think of all the ways to connect with this person, not just in what the firm can do for them, but the other connections that they have that are going to be beneficial to you and to the firm. Yeah. This is a litigation firm. And I wrote that, and an old legal marketing colleague who's been a consultant for many, many years and is a co-founder of this organization, Lasso, Catherine, saw that post and she pinged me and she said, I'd love for you to talk about it. We don't have anybody speaking about AI at the conference. Would you like to put a presentation together about that? And I was delighted to do so. And I wove in, there was a wonderful book called Richard Scarry, What Do People Do All Day?
Sure.
And I was also rereading a book by Priya Parker about the art of networking at the time.
Okay.
So the presentation was a really interesting combination of Richard Scarry, Priya Parker, and AI, and how to actually use the three as a combination of networking and how to get to know people, and how AI can be a huge tool in helping you do the research and then hone and come up with questions to ask.
We've seen that internally here, just how AI can help in that networking side as a resource and a tool to help make you more efficient and make you better use of your time, I should say.
It's an amazing tool.
Yeah.
It's an amazing tool, and I think everybody needs to get comfortable with it, regardless of what your day job is.
Yeah. Now, I got to ask, it's a TED-style speaking event with Lasso. Was there any Ted Lasso references?
No Ted Lasso. I did bring gifts. I did bring Richard Scarry and Priya Parker books, though, to give out to people who participated.
That's amazing.
And I could have had a dartboard, I guess, and done the barbecue sauce.
That's amazing. So public speaking, I think, is an animal in its own way. How did you find a passion for public speaking to begin with? And do you have a history in the arts? I've seen that before, where folks have a performance background, that then this becomes a new avenue for that.
That's an interesting question. It wasn't on your pre-read, and
it was not.
I love it. I actually directed school productions from a relatively young age. I've been a natural organizer and leader since I was very small. Some people might say I was bossy since I was very small, but I'm not front of the house. I'm more back of the house.
Sure.
I don't do well at memorizing. I never have. But I do think when I am knowledgeable and I do deep research on anything that I prepare for, as you guys saw from my notes this morning.
Very thorough.
I like teaching people and getting them excited about something that's new and different. So I've given keynotes on wild, disparate things over my career, related to my kids and some of their challenges, and special needs in education. To me, the combination of writing and speaking is the killer combo, because you can hit people in different ways, and humor obviously helps. When I got divorced, I started doing some stand-up.
Oh, wow.
So I have been on stage doing stand-up.
I had a feeling the spidey senses were going up.
And that was great fun. It's not very conducive to doing it with a job that you're working, 7 to 9 or 7 to 10 some days.
Sure.
But I don't know, maybe in my retirement, I'll be the oldest 70, plus year old person to get on stage and do it professionally. Who knows?
Sure. I mean, that's an incredible outlet, and something that, did you ever think you'd be doing stand-up? Yeah.
When
I never thought I'd be doing a podcast.
Did you like speaking when you were younger and asking questions? Were you curious?
Yes.
Okay.
Curiosity is ingrained in me.
As it is in me.
Yeah.
And I think that when you're a presenter or an interviewer, curiosity is one of the biggest pieces to have a genuine interest in what the other person's about. So one of the things, TED-style is 18 minutes. And some TED Talks are certainly more interactive than others. I love presentations when I get to do a keynote and I get to know the audience well beforehand, and then we get to actually riff. And the similarity between improv and comedy, and I think keynoting, if you're going to open it up, is a lot of keynote speakers don't like to open it up because they don't know where the audience is going to take it. And it has to be very scripted. My view is I'm happy to go off script and improv based on what the questions of an audience are. And sometimes with keynotes, you're going to have a difficult person.
Sure.
But I've worked in professional services for most of my career.
You're used to managing personalities.
I am. And I hope people are entertained so that they remember the stories that I'm telling. I had dinner in California a couple of nights ago with some of the junior folks from our firm and one of the leaders after we had a team leadership meeting. And I went to dinner with him. And one of the guys who had just started when I was doing the training in Chicago came over to me and said, your presentation, was so great to hear the first week that I was here. And I knew exactly who he was because he came over to me and he introduced himself and he asked a lot of questions that day. And that was wonderful because he was new. He didn't have any qualms about saying, I don't know this, I don't know this. He wasn't supposed to.
Sure. I think that's, asking questions, a little bit of a tangent, but it's something that we see internally. New hires come in and we always encourage folks, ask questions because you're going to be invested in learning. You're going to be invested in what's being talked about. And I feel like too often people are afraid to ask questions. But in my experience, the more questions I ask, the more answers that come along and opportunities start to come about. So I love asking questions.
I agree. I can't help myself. Yeah. Like if I want to know or you say something, like I just have to know. Like there's nothing that would stop me from asking, like, well, why this? And I really want to know, like, when you decided to do stand-up, like, what was that moment in your brain to be like, I'm going to go in front of 40 to 100 strangers and see what happens?
A few hundred, actually.
A few.
The end
Wow.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be very honest. So I had a lot of feelings. I was getting divorced after almost 20 years of marriage.
Wow.
And I felt like, and this is the authentic piece that makes public speaking very easy and made stand-up easy. I felt if I could help other people by sharing my story and sharing some of the insane things that had happened and how I kind of came through it on the other side, without being nasty.
Sure.
Stands up gives an opportunity if you can write a good joke or package a good joke in a way that's self-deprecating.
Sure.
And people always say that comedy is a combination of pain plus time. And I didn't have a lot of time there, so I was packing it in. It was like doing a new rebrand. I was doing it really fast. And I thought, okay, if I ramp it up quickly and I get on stage. And it was cathartic in many, many ways. Oh, I'm going to tell you another related story that was fabulous, all at the same time. So I got divorced, and my mom was dying at the same time, exactly the same time.
Wow.
And I was dealing with some school challenges with my older. And I was still running my business. It was a very messy time of life. But my mom passed away right before Memorial Day.
Okay.
And I had gone to see a movie. I came home, I got the phone call, and I learned that you can take care of everything from like cremation to services online, which was a kind of one of those aha moments. And then I was going up to a place in the Berkshires called Kripalu to take a comedy writing workshop. Oh. And I had to deal with stuff in the city, and then I drove up to the Berkshires, about 2.5, 3 hours away. And I walked in. I had never met the teachers before. It was a small group of maybe 14 people. And everybody was doing the introductions, and I was almost the last person. I was like the penultimate person. And I made some comment about, Marilyn. Here's the late Marilyn Monroe. Here's the late Linda Orton. And we did our intro, and I said, I know you all think that you're here to do a comedy workshop, but as bonus, you're also sitting Shiva with me. And I could immediately tell who was Jewish and who wasn't, because sitting Shiva means after somebody passes away, you basically have 3 to 7 days of mourning. And the people who were Jewish who got it, including the teachers, were astonished because it was a somewhat unusual place to choose to actually mourn the passing, but I had a very strange relationship with my mom. It was the best cathartic thing I could have possibly done. And when I did a memorial service for my mom a few months later, I did a stand-up routine. It was my first stand-up routine. Wow. And Beth coached me on that. And then she actually did a performance that if people wanted to stick around for it, they could. So you got far more than you bargained for on that answer. But
it's even more intriguing.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
So that was my first comedy. Getting on stage for that were friends and family, and that was about 60 people. And then I actually looked for open mics in New York, and I did a bunch of open mics when I didn't have my kids with me.
Okay.
And then I started looking into getting booked, and Levity Live is a place in Westchester that holds a couple hundred people. And it was very similar to speaking on stage for public presentations. The content was obviously much different.
I would imagine that also becomes a different way to embrace creativity and get that side of your brain just working.
Absolutely. And I had people come up to me afterwards and say, thank you so much for sharing that story. You know, it touched me, it helped me. And that's why
you started it to begin with.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
So,
well, think about life experiences. You also recently stepped outside of the comfort zone a little bit and took a solo cruise. I saw the LinkedIn post the other day about it.
I did.
How has that experience, doing something that's not something you've tried before, even this many years into your career, what is that experience like for you?
It was fabulous. It's not, traveling solo is definitely not for everybody, but I'm an only child, so I've traveled by myself since I was very young.
Myra's.
Same. I'm an only child.
It does make a difference.
It does.
I really do think that certain things that other people would never do, go out to eat by themselves, see a movie, see a show, and I believe that digital advertising not only reads our texts or watches our scrolling history, but I do think that conspiracy theory, I think they read our brains a little bit right now also, because I don't think I actually had put down or done any searching. I got the right ad at the right time. And the reason I chose Crystal was not only did the timing fit when I wanted to go, I knew they had a great reputation for being very high end. And as a solo traveler, I wasn't going to get penalized for traveling by myself and be put in a yucky little room. I had a beautiful, beautiful room that I ultimately chose to upgrade to.
Sure.
I wanted to go places I hadn't been to before, so the cruise covered the Canary Islands, Morocco, and then Portugal.
Okay.
And
it's amazing.
It's my next trip.
Myra's taking notes over here.
I am.
I'm happy to share with you any information that you would like. And I was delighted to kind of share the experience through LinkedIn because people have reached out to me, as they do on LinkedIn, about the experience, about what traveling by myself, was like, and doing that. There were wonderful people on the ship. I met couples. I met other solo travelers. I met the clergy. I went to Shabbat services one night, which I would never do at home because it was there. I almost went to Mass because it was there.
Because it was there.
I met the Catholic father who was on board. I met the two rabbis who were an adorable older couple who were together, and they served. The whole thing was wondrul.
You found yourself in conversations with people that you usually wouldn't.
Oh no, I would.
Or maybe you would.
It was just a captive audience.
Okay. I guess when you're on the cruise, you have to be a captive audience.
Some people, everybody does it that works for them. Some people chose to be far more quiet, but if I was sitting by myself eating and a couple was next to me, it was far enough away that if we didn't want to engage, we didn't have to. But some of them would say, would you like to talk with us? Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, just a lovely, lovely experience. And some of the people that I met gave me recommendations for the places that we were going to next. I discovered a gorgeous private house and gardens called Quinta Regulara.
Okay.
I'm all the pronunciation, I'm sure, in Sintra, because I sat next to a wonderful couple who were from California, and she was Peruvian, and they had been there traveling before, so they made that recommendation to me. It just wonderful, wonderful experiences. I met somebody on the ship who I'd been connected to on Facebook for 12 years as Facebook friends.
Wow.
She's a photographer who I followed and an educator, and brilliant and funny. And I saw through Facebook that she was actually in the Canary Islands, said she was teaching on a ship, but she didn't say where. And when I showed up to get some pointers, because photography is a big hobby of mine.
Okay.
And she was teaching about some mobile use of tools of your phone.
Sure.
And her partner came up to me and said, Jan knew you were going to be on here because he saw your post. So, I feel like I made a real friends based on the fact that we had been connected online for so long. So that was just happenstance and was wonderful.
That's incredible.
Small world, very small world.
One of my friends says it's not a small world, it's just not very well mixed.
Oh.
And I kind of like that.
Yes.
Because it's a huge world, but some of us just tend to be in the same spheres a little bit more regularly.
Do our own percolation.
Exactly. But it was a wonderful experience. I appreciate you asking me about that.
Absolutely. That all came about from a LinkedIn post, and you're talking about the connection through Facebook. Was there a light bulb moment for you, being in the marketing side, where you see this rise in short form we talked about earlier, where you saw the value of creating posts on LinkedIn and how it can open conversations and doors?
I started writing on LinkedIn when it first came out. I started my company doing consulting and recruitment before LinkedIn was a glimmer in Reid Hoffman's eye, probably.
Sure.
We did it the old-fashioned way. You actually had to call people and network and research. And let me tell you, research before LinkedIn was quite the challenge.
Yes.
But for me, LinkedIn has been a very quiet way of communicating. I think the more writing I do and the closer I get to actually finishing a book that I'm working on, that I've been working on for a while and I will complete, I love writing. I love connecting with people through my writing. Mm-hmm. When people write for the algorithm, it's not always natural and it's not always what our writing should be. And that's the distinction between writing long form content and writing for social media. But I speak to my firm now on a regular basis about the value and importance of LinkedIn and connecting with people through commenting, not only writing their own content.
I love that you're calling this out.
It's so important because it's true engagement. Yeah. And marketing is about communications and business development is about communications. Yes. And effective communications, going full circle, means going back to being curious.
Yes.
And not just writing for the sake of writing, but encouraging engagement and back and forth. So I've been a passive writer on LinkedIn since its inception 21 years ago. I started embracing it more wholeheartedly more recently because I enjoy it and because, again, I think it can help others. So I enjoy doing it if I think it can help others.
I share a lot of the same mindset with LinkedIn. It's been something that about 3 years ago now, I started getting much more serious with as a professional tool and as something that should be conduit to our clients and to the network that we're building. But it has been just that. You find yourself in the comment sections on posts, folks that you get to know, they're taking the time to write these posts. They're invested in telling whatever story it is. So why would you not take the time to drop a comment and ask them about what they're posting about? I love that.
I don't know if the professionals in law, accounting, and consulting always understand the value that can come out of it. And it's not for us in B2B. It's not all about the volume and the numbers. It's about connecting with the right people.
Yes.
So I'd rather have a post that maybe gets 100 likes, but gets some really pithy, relevant comments that turn into...
You read every comment.
I do. For me, that's kind of late night activity. Yeah. It's not the best thing to do before I go to sleep because it revs me up. But I've learned certain techniques. If I have a glimmer of an idea, I take a note on it and I'll write down what I'm thinking of at the moment. Same as any writing, because you don't hold on to it if you don't write it down.
I love that.
And then I'll expound on it. And depending upon what's happening at the moment, maybe tie in some relevancy to world economics or politics, or you have to decide on LinkedIn what you want to be writing about. And it's not Facebook and it's not Instagram, and it shouldn't be.
Yes.
So there's a fine line, but I do share some of my experiences as a professional working mom with special needs kids, because my path has been different. And, you know, I'm delighted to say both my kids are doing incredibly well right now, but they're in their early 20s, and it wasn't always that way.
Sure.
So
I think anytime you can find ways to relate to folks, and, you know, thinking through that's very specific story of single mom, special needs kids. There's others out there that are identifying that way, and that in particular. I had a sister that's a special needs child. It's a conversation that not many people have. So the fact you're taking the time to do that, it means a lot to the folks that it's relevant for.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So you think back to the start of your career. We've covered a lot, from your time in college to the early parts of your career to where you're at today. At one point, you were an aspiring student. And what words of encouragement would you give to young professionals now that are either just starting their career, or folks that are at the University of Chicago looking at a marketing career as a potential avenue for them? What words of encouragement would you give to folks?
Oh, so many words. I would highly encourage anybody to do an internship, paid or unpaid, in an area that they're thinking of going into. I am so grateful I worked for law firms before I went to law school, because for me, the choice not to go to law school became clear after I actually had done the work for a while. I worked as a litigation paralegal. I worked in recruitment, and I managed people. And what I learned from that experience is I loved the managing projects and people more than perhaps the passion of the law. Okay. I ultimately was the marketing director for an intellectual property firm. And if I had known about intellectual property, maybe I would have pursued that path of legal. But my point with that is, I think people have a concept of what a job is like. And we're living in a world where, because of the rapid change in technology, that in 5 or 10 years, a lot of the jobs that are going to be, they're not created right now. So we don't know what necessarily is. So to your point earlier about being able to write across all areas and communicate across all areas, I still believe a broad education, whether it's Chicago or Columbia or Hopkins, which are great books programs and teach kids how to think. I would encourage everybody to know and feel comfortable with technology, not just social media, for the younger people and for the older people. My biggest frustration in coaching friends or colleagues who are thinking about making a career transition in their 40s or 50s or 60s is they don't embrace technology. They're scared of it. Yeah. And you can't be a successful contributing worker right now for yourself or for a company if you don't understand the value of technology. Yeah. And
it's transformed everything.
And it will continue to in faster clip moving forward. So I just be curious. I mean, that's the biggest thing. If you have the opportunity to speak to people who are in a field that you think you might want to go into, or a tangential area that you're not sure about, ask questions and be quiet and listen.
I love that. Ask questions, be curious. It's fundamental to finding your way. I love that. Well, Linda, it has been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit more today on the podcast. I hope our listeners have enjoyed hearing your journey through a few different decades of marketing. And more than anything, feel free to be a guest anytime. You're always welcome back. But it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks.